Thank you so much for sharing your personal story. It really is meaningful to hear those kinds of stories. And I think that having each of the various members of Congress come up and talk to us about them really brings home the fact that these are issues that will affect all of us. If they haven't already, they will. Every one of us in one way or another will be touched by these. Next, I would like to welcome and introduce Representative Chris Smith, who has represented the 4th District of New Jersey since 1980. He's a senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He previously chaired the Veterans Affairs Committee, and I was really grateful that we talked about veterans a little bit previously. Representative Smith is known for his bipartisan work on many commissions and caucuses, including the Caucus on Autism, which he co-founded, as well as the Alzheimer's Caucus, which he also co-founded. Thank you, Congressman Smith, for being here today.
Thank you. And thank you for putting this very important gathering together. Just a couple of points, and I want to thank Jennifer Pollack from the Alzheimer's Association. Ed Markey and I, when we formed the Alzheimer's Caucus, which is a bipartisan caucus 17 years ago, we put a great emphasis on increasing the NIH funding, and we always wanted to double it. Well, the good news is that we're at the point now of almost tripling it. Tom Cole, the chairman of the HS Appropriations Committee, and Roy Blunt are competing to who gets it higher, and we're at about $1.8 billion, and I think money makes the difference when it comes to research, so we're making some progress. Senator Grassley and I both reintroduced the Kevin and Avante law on wandering, and hopefully we'll get it passed this time. Last year I authored it. It got to the Senate, and holds were put on it and never made it past. Those holds were added again this year, so stay tuned. Just a couple of personal stories. Before I do it, I would say, like my colleagues before, I'll be brief. I also chaired the Lyme Disease Caucus, and I spoke at their big conference just a few weeks ago. There were about 1,000 people there, a lot of families, and we're in an endemic area in New Jersey for Lyme disease. So I asked, they gave me the keynote, and I said, how long do you want me to speak? They said, you got an hour. I took the full hour and 5 minutes. At the end of it, this little girl came up. She looked up at me, and she said, Mister, your speech was long and boring. Turned around and walked away. A few minutes later, her father came up and said, I saw you talking to my little daughter, Melissa. I just want you to know she's 4, and she's at that awkward age who just repeats whatever she hears. So I'll be very brief. And this is a personal story. Prime caregivers, as we all know, are saints. In 1996, my mother was diagnosed with brain cancer, along with early signs of Alzheimer's disease, and lived with my family, my wife, Marie, and our 4 children for almost a year. Despite having broken hearts over her ordeal, brain surgery at the University of Penn, and a long recuperation, mental confusion, we absolutely cherished her living with us. My wife, Marie, the primary caregiver, was a saint, is a saint today, but was a saint during this crisis. Nothing was too much for Marie, including 24/7 monitoring. We had a child monitor hooked up to our room and hers, and we had one eye to it, just like you do with a newborn, to make sure if something's happening, we're down into her room to try to mitigate a problem. Of course, we had other problems. We had to ensure that she took her medicines in a timely fashion and the right amounts, doctor visits, and reassurances that we gave often. Mom, you are not a burden. We love you, and there is no other place on earth we would want you to be than with us. We had many sleepless nights. Twice the EMT were called, of course they're in the middle of the night, for medical emergencies. The brain cancer eclipsed the progression of Alzheimer's, so the tell-all forgetfulness and other deleterious effects on patients was still in its early stages. During one emergency hospitalization, however, at Fox Chase in Pennsylvania, my mother looked up at us and said, I thought I was lost and you would never find me. When she went to a hospice later on, my wife, brothers, and I were with her around the clock. My mother had a strong faith in God and always, but always put family first. She was a successful businesswoman, and along with my dad, who was a combat war veteran who fought in New Guinea and in the Philippines, they formed their own small business, and she took care of the books, and she knew those books. In math, she had a penchant for math like nobody else. You could say, what about this? She knew right where to find it, almost a photographic memory. but in the final years had trouble writing a check. My mother's extraordinary faith, her love, her goodness, her empathy for others, and her courage during this ordeal continues to inspire my family and me to this day.